Are you ready to know what it's like to grow yourself beyond different businesses? This is the Scale You Podcast Season 3, where we'll be focusing on a lot of our guests who have multiple businesses or who have had multiple businesses, the journey they've gone through on that so far, bits and pieces of advice, and to get you out of that grind and into scaling you. Now, as a total disclaimer for this episode, we have tried to re-record this twice now, and even during this recording, we had a lot of weird technical issues and things that were just happening. So it might be that in one part of the podcast, it might be different audio, different camera, just because we're trying to figure things out and make sure that we get so much value for you guys, because our guest today is amazing and someone I've been looking forward to having on the Scale You podcast. That's why I was super determined to make sure that she was here. Now, our guest today is Gina Romero, and she is a Filipino-British entrepreneur, community builder, and technology advocate. She is the founder and head of projects for Connected Women, an ethical data and AI services company. Connected Women has earned global recognition for its work in inclusive innovation, future of work, e-employment, and women empowerment. In 2022, Gina was honored as a finalist in the Global Women in AI Awards by VentureBeat and as the recipient of the prestigious Towns Award, celebrating her exceptional dedication, talent, and positive contributions to society. She also currently serves on the board of trustees of De La Salle University. Hey guys, so please help me welcome our guest today, the amazing and phenomenal Miss Gina Romero. Hi, Gina.
Hi, great to be here, finally.
Finally, after multiple rescheduling and figuring out between businesses how does this all work, you're finally here, and you're actually going to be one of our first guests for the season of figuring out or what it looks like for someone to have multiple businesses and exploring that and seeing what the reality of it is. So to kind of introduce yourself to, of course, our amazing audience, tell us more about who you were kind of before of like the the main highlights of your life as you were starting to get into the point where you had multiple businesses.
Gosh, well, for those who know me will probably know that I've had a kind of strange life. So I was a pig farmer at one point in Pampanga, in my mom's hometown. I was a British Airways cabin crew for a part of my life. I was an IT director with my husband in the UK. And then I became a technology and women's empowerment advocate. And now I'm in AI. So it's been a journey.
Yeah. It's I remember when I first heard your story of such the extremes of life, basically, of just like how both random and very interesting it could be. So what was then, as you kind of gone through a little bit different careers, you became director. I remember that you, with your husband as well, you kind of built out a little bit of a mini empire. Tell us what that journey was like. Like how did you get to the point where you had one businesses like, oh, let's try this venture, this venture. What was that journey like?
So I think like many entrepreneurs in the beginning, it was more about trying to solve my own problem, right? So we were a young couple with young kids, and I was on maternity leave from flying. He was in a job working as a systems engineer for a company. So, our early businesses, like many others, were just side hustles, like how do we earn a bit of extra cash? So the first business that we had together was selling laptops on eBay. And it was just kind of like, oh, how do we make a bit of extra money? This is something that we could do. eBay was kind of new, so we started buying and selling laptops in newspapers, in the classified ads, and then we were like, oh, eBay, it was literally the transition from like offline selling to online selling. So we did that for a bit, and there was a point where that like home business started to do really well, and I said to my husband, maybe it's not just a hobby, right? And there's a side hustle, maybe there's a business in this. And so that's when we decided to kind of focus on that first business. So that was our first business. It was a really small business in North London in the UK. And it was something that was really exciting for us because it was just early days. And we were doing lots of different things at the same time, right? So I went back flying at one point. We were doing that. My husband was working still in his job, and we were doing that on the side. And then I think he transitioned first, and I transitioned after into doing it full time. So that was like the first entrepreneurship stint that we had.
Got it. So then that's super interesting. And I remember the day and age of eBay, even in the Philippines, it was kind of a thing. Of course, like other, the carousel, I remember came up in competition for eBay for the Philippines. So for reference, for a lot of people who don't know what it is, imagine Amazon, but it was all used things, but basically people are reselling their old stuff. That's an
And it was
interesting kind
bidding,
of.
remember? It was
Mhm.
auction. So that made it really
Oh
extra fun.
yeah, I remember. Yeah, I still have a typewriter somewhere in my room where it was by bidding through
There you
through
go.
eBay. I still have it. Got it. So then, what was kind of the list of businesses that you went through then? Like I like that you guys like. Oh, this is a little bit of a gold mine. Let's go into this. What was the next couple of businesses after that?
So that business transitioned from selling hardware online into more of a services business. So that was when
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi started booming, and a lot of companies wanted to have Wi-Fi in their offices and in their homes even. So we kind of moved into Wi-Fi. So we've always been a little bit ahead of the game,
In
and then
tech,
we
yeah.
tend to move into the next thing, right? Like when the next new thing is happening and the other thing is dying out, we
Mm-hmm.
kind of transition. So we moved into Wi-Fi. We did a lot of sort of like remote work setups even then. Gosh, I'm talking timeline wise, right? So this is like 2002,
Mm-hmm.
2003, super early. So we did that. But I also then had this sort of segue where I got into the women's communities, because
Mm-hmm.
I joined a women's community in the UK called the Athena Network. And that was where I was getting my business. Basically, it was like a networking group for women in the local area. It was all over
Mm-hmm.
the country, and it still exists today. In fact, the founder is a really dear friend of mine.
Oh.
But yeah, like that was the beginning of the sort of women's networking boom in the UK. And I started out as a member, and then my husband was headhunted by one of our biggest clients to go and work for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the founder of that network asked me if I wanted to go and be her operations director. So I got involved in that business. That was super fun because it was franchising. So I got to learn a little bit about franchising, and we scaled it all over the UK. So I did that. But I was still, at one point we were running the company. I was doing the networking. And I ended up with one of my own franchises as well. I had the North London franchise of the Athena Network. And then I
Wow.
was still flying. So it wasn't so much multiple businesses, but lots of things going on at once. And of course, being a young parent at the time as well.
So what were the challenges there of like kind of having two careers at the same time? Third being parent basically. What was kind of the challenges for that of like balancing time in between or mainly of course priorities?
So I think it was a lot of these things, when I look back, were actually quite deliberate. Like I was looking for things that I could do that would allow me to manage a young family, right? And a young relationship. So I think the reason why we started doing the side hustle is because I probably recognized that I wasn't going to be able to go back full-time flying with two young kids. So, buying and selling is a brilliant, flexible business, right? As long as you can find the right products. And you have to be a little bit nimble as well, because the product popularity changes and all the rest. And then the franchise thing was perfect because that complemented the IT business. Because while I was running that, and that business was a membership model, so you earn money from having
Oh.
members. And then when members join and then they learn about my IT business, that also generated business for us. So I think like 80% of our IT clients came from that network, although they were not the actual members. They were sort of the third party clients and contacts of my members, because my target audience, yeah, exactly, like the target audience was like we were looking for investment banks and like high net worth family offices, and they weren't necessarily the demographic of that network.
Got it. So there was a lot of I hear a lot of intention going into it, like, oh, I know this is not a lifestyle that we can maintain anymore. A lot of changes going into it, as well as like of course the boom of having people who wanted to refer you. So nowadays, tell us more about like what it is that you're focusing on, what you're doing. Because I'm fully in your community, so I would love to know and have you describe to people like especially with AI, because like I remember for us the two of us connected a lot when it came to like, oh, this is so cool, we can add this, you can do this. So tell us more about what you're currently busy with and doing right now.
you're even more fully in the community now that all this stuff has been happening. Yeah, so, well, I guess a little bit of context. So the reason why we started Connected Women, or why I started it, why I had the idea for it, is that I really wanted to give opportunities for Filipino women to have online jobs, right? Because my mom was a domestic worker. She left the country in the 70s. And when I lived and worked in Singapore with my husband, I met so many Filipino domestic workers. And so, you know, this problem is something that I've been seeing since I was a child, like parents having to leave the families behind, not because necessarily they want to, because sometimes, you know, people like to migrate, right, and move abroad and all the rest, but people that really have no choice, because there's just no way that they can earn enough to educate their children and build that life back home. So Connected Women really started with the focus and the passion to solve a problem, like how do we bring opportunities home. So we've been through different transitions, you know, from initially we wanted to be a job matching platform because we thought so many people need talent and we have so much talent in the Philippines, so if we could just match them to jobs, Filipino women getting jobs with entrepreneurs globally, then that would be great. But we actually had some challenges there that caused us to pivot to the AI space. And some of the challenges that we experienced was that, you know what it's like, it's super competitive in the freelancing space. It's not something that you can enter easily without experience. And even if you do, you know, there are just so many people that are more experienced. It's just very difficult. And we really wanted to help the women that come from, you know, less privileged backgrounds sometimes, with less education, less experience. So I was like, what is a really entry level, you know, starting point that people can get into in IT, and especially in emerging technologies like AI. And we came across some really interesting businesses where they were training people without IT skills, without IT experience, and helping them get into the data annotation space, which is preparing data that is used to train the AI models. It's so much easier talking about this now because everyone's using AI and they kind of know they
it's
are.
easy to understand.
Right? Yeah, like 2 years ago, it's like, what are you talking about? So yeah, so like all these tools that we use, like ChatGPT and all of the rest of it, still have a lot of human labor that has to work behind the scenes to prepare and train these models. And there's so much data that's needed, right? And the data has to be clean. So that's what we do at Mettamatch, which is basically a services business that provides different AI data preparation services to global companies that are building AI apps. So a bit of a stretch from where I came from back in the day, but that's where we are.
It's amazing still though, because like a lot of people still forget that, like, that AI isn't just running on itself or feeding itself. It's still being fed by a human, basically, of like, hey, this is information, or fix this, or don't think of it that way. It's still a when I first found out that that was where you guys were moving into, I was like, oh, that's genius. Like that bridges people from being also afraid of AI to being a little bit more confident of like, oh, that's how that works. It's not just a magic box that we don't see. There's actually a process that goes into it. So that's amazing. So with that, then, as someone who's both really experienced on seeing companies grow and you grow your own company as well, and as you go into, it's not really fully a new venture, because of course you're launching off of what you've already established for yourself and other amazing people as well. What is that kind of difference of having the newer businesses coming from someone who's had those years and years of experience?
Yeah, so I think, well, I think we go through different phases, right? So in the beginning, I like to do lots of different things, like different types of brands that targeted different audiences, because I had, you know, like I had my women's audience, and then I had my technology audience, right, which wasn't necessarily women. So I think a lot of the time, you know, for me, I just like to solve problems for different types of people. And if I feel that I have a means to solve that problem, then I want to go after it, even if it's nothing to do with me, right? Even now I'm like, oh, maybe we could solve this. And then I'm like, no, just stay focused. Because, you know, what we're doing right now is like a real big handful. I mean, Connected Women is 200,000 members strong now. It's all part of the same business. So on one hand, we have the training. On the other hand, we have the upskilling and the community activities. And then now that's transitioning into something more of a sort of talent hub. So we're going to be launching Talent Hub on Connected Women, where the ladies who upskill with us could potentially get matched to opportunities through Mettamatch. So I've managed to finally consolidate all the different audiences that I want to help and my different passions into one. But I think in the beginning, it's really great to explore different things, right? You can't always find ways that all of your different business ideas will complement each other. But I'm a strong believer in testing and playing around with different things, right? And your different passions, figuring out which one you really feel you can grow and which one you can drive. And then ideally finding a way that these businesses can complement each other. Because it's kind of difficult to have like one business that does something completely different and another business that does something completely different. And then you can't really share the resources, right? You can't share the talent, you can't share for me, that's a difficult way to do it. But some people do it really successfully. Don't know how.
Well, it's funny because like we see, of course, like companies like Samsung or even Apple or like so many of these other brands that we know where we just know them from this, years ago we would have just known Samsung for their phones. Like, no, they're also in like washing machines. They used to be even in laptops. They've kind of grown into this, and we also see other companies where, like you said, like they have different industries, but they somehow make it work. But I love that you made a point of like it's a little bit more fun when you're able to experiment.
Well, I think vision sums it up. I mean, I've done businesses where, for example, the IT business, right? Like I was really supporting my husband and his area of passion at that time. I didn't really have a passion for IT myself. And so, then it's a little bit more of a job, right? And then after some time of being involved in the business, and especially when, we started building up a client base and I was very much involved with the clients, and I realized how important IT is to their business, to them, how it empowers them. I started to see beyond just the technical components, right? Like the power of this tool to really inspire and help people reach their dreams. I know it sounds super corny, but I'm not really just about doing the job and using the tools, right? I really want to see the people component, I guess, and see people thrive. So I think that's where I get really passionate about something. And then, when you're passionate about something and you found that whatever it is that you're trying to do in that business, everything is a lot easier. Like it doesn't feel as difficult every day. And even when you have challenges, it's kind of fun. I mean, I don't like having problems. Nobody does, firefighting and all that, but it does keep it interesting, right? Like if every day was just smooth sailing, and I'm not that type of person that can just run an operation that's smooth and sort of keep it ticking over. I like to start things up when it's all clunky and awkward. We have a CEO now at Connected Women, right? Well, now she's been with us 2 years, and it's been so amazing because when we were starting it all out and there were so many experimental things to do, it was fun for me. And then suddenly I was like, I am getting so bored because it was like very operational, day-to-day contracts and all of that. And then I realized like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not the right CEO to scale this business. So once we'd sort of found our feet and knew the direction that we were going in, we brought in this amazing, very experienced CEO who's now running it. And I can focus on developing new products, new ideas, new programs. So that's why I've managed to push out a few new programs in the last year or so, because I've had that brain space to really think about the innovation side, which is, I think, what I'm much better at doing. But anyway,
fingers crossed that it's all good.
Where were we? I can't remember what we were talking about.
The question I was asking was essentially, what was that transition like for you of getting to the point where you had someone who was a CEO rather than is all you? Because a lot of people are really scared about that transition of like, oh, it's all me versus like, hey, I don't think I'm the right fit for this. I think it's someone else who will go into that. What was the transition like?
Yeah, so I think it's a realization. I mean, it's something that I had considered before, thinking about, because our goal was always to scale the business. So the question in my head was, am I the person to scale it, right? Am I like a Zuckerberg type where it's going to be me and I'm going to have to grow into that CEO of this huge company if we grow really big? And so I'm basically going to have to learn how to be a CEO of a scaling company. Or does it make more sense to have someone who already has that experience under their belt so that I can really focus on the things that I enjoy more? And, as we were going through the early stages of growth, I mean, we're still a relatively small company, an early stage, but I could already sense that some of the things that we needed to start putting in place, right? Like the systems, the processes, the operations, the compliance. When you have to start tightening up all those things, it was becoming less fun for me and less exciting and less interesting. And you start to sense your motivation kind of dropping, right? When you have days when you look at your calendar or your to-do list and you're like, oh, these are the things on my list today. And for me, being an entrepreneur is all about that spark, right? It's all about that passion and having that opportunity to do what I want to do and having the freedom to do the things that I want to do. So, I just thought, and there's a trade-off, right? As an entrepreneur, like you carry a lot of risk. You don't have the vacation days, especially in the early days, you work all hours. Like there's a lot of trade-offs at that early stage. But for me, I was like, okay, I don't want to, I don't want to be that person who grows into a role and ends up hating it. So I said to Ruth, like 2 years before we were even going to look for a CEO, or before we were even ready to hire a CEO, I said to Ruth, who's my co-founder, we need to find a CEO before we scale or when we're ready to scale, so that person can step in. And she said, are you sure about that? And I said, I'm definitely not the one. I was saying about Zuckerberg, right? Like you've got the Zuckerbergs that grow it and grow with it, but then you also have like the Google people, right? The two Google boys who were just like, okay, build this thing, give it to a person to scale it out and commercialize it. And I don't think I ever saw myself as being that person that would take it all the way to wherever it goes. But obviously, I'm still super involved in the business. I'm just a little bit more in the dark room doing the more experimental early stage projects. And, if any of the projects that I play with become kind of successful, show potential, that's when I hand it over to the operations team to then roll it. And that's, for me, the best place to be.
God, that's amazing then. So then that ties in beautifully with my last favorite question usually that I ask on the podcast, which is if we had a perfect cloning, let's say AI got to the point where it can clone an actual human being, and there was 2 Ginas, 3, 5, 10, 300 Ginas, what would be the change or the impact that you want to create in the world?
Gosh, that's a terrifying thought.
Hopefully not arguing.
Well, we were talking about this on the panel the other day, but not from this perspective. We were talking about what if AI takes your job, right? Like, because there's so much fear around AI taking your job. And I was kind of like, I wish AI could take my job, right? If AI could take my job and go solve the problems that I'm trying to solve and do the things that I'm trying to do, then there's so many other things that I could go and do that an AI couldn't do. Like get in a river, right? And dig out some plastic waste and go and, rescue some strays in the street or whatever it could be. I'd probably, go and do something completely different with my life. But I don't think that there's a reality of that happening anytime soon. But, it would be amazing to have more hands, right? Like as a business owner, you can never be moving fast enough. And it's so frustrating when you're in that sort of early pre-scaling stage where you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough hands to do all the things that you need to do. So everything feels super slow. Like for me, this year, I'm like, what? We're already September. It feels like the year has gone so fast, but I just feel like I'm walking through mud sometimes and I can't do all the things, right? Especially if you have multiple big projects that you're trying to move simultaneously, and then you're kind of like part of all of those. So it would be amazing to just focus on one thing and just do that one thing, and then have another me focus on another thing and do that one thing, and just be like a single tasker. For once, that would be, I think, the ideal. But in reality, we have to do the multitasking until we get to that point, I guess. And that's what makes it fun. We don't have luck, you and I together on podcasts. It's okay. I'm sure you've done many, many podcasts and haven't had a blip at all, and so have I. But for some reason, we don't have It's our combined energy, maybe. We're blowing up the internet.
It might also be that, I don't know, if one of these days we're in the same space together, somehow that we'll just do a live one, because then any tech issues, at least we're in the same space. So you were at the point where basically finding ways to make the world a better place, finding the impact. That was where I kind of sadly got cut off.
Well, I carried on, so I think that answer would be a good answer if you can recover that bit, but if not, I'll redo it. No, so I think there's so many things that I would be doing outside of the work that I do if an AI could do my job for me. But I really don't think, honestly, that is going to happen in the near future, at least. Watch this space, right? Like, you know, those kind of like, that didn't age well comments where next week I'm like completely redundant because AI is just doing my job. But anyway, we'll see. But you know, if we had multiple me's, I think one thing that we don't have a luxury of as entrepreneurs, especially in the earlier pre sort of scaling or starting to scale stage, is like focusing on one thing. Like, it would be such a luxury to go, this is the project that I'm focusing on for the next 3 to 6 months, and I'm just going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, but because, I mean, like many people, I have many kind of concurrent, all important big things to do. And so I just feel like I stretch myself across all the different areas. And it would be just so amazing if there was like 10 of me and each one of me could take one project and just run it with 100% focus. Oh my gosh, that would just be such a dream. And if they were all doing it without me, I'd probably just read a book. I haven't read a book for so long, literally. Like, you know, like just do nothing but just read the book cover to cover.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a beautiful world to be in. I can imagine that there will be multiple Ginas starting different things all at once, and then you have the 2 or 3 Ginas who are studying, reading. So then, you know, you can impart that knowledge and that education to the other Ginas in the world. So how can people find you? How people get to know you? And also definitely if they want to be part of the current wave of innovation that you're doing, how can they get to know you more?
Sure. So, well, I post most of my work on LinkedIn. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I am Gina Romero. And if you want to find out about Connected Women's community, you can go to connectedwomen.co. And then if you're interested in finding out about our technology services, our AI services, then you can check out Mettamatch.com. That's Mettamatch with 2 T's.
Perfect. Thank you so much for today, Gina. And despite all the technical difficulties, we've stayed on. We're finally wrapped up. Hopefully everything will be uploaded. So thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
So I hope you guys were able to enjoy that interview with Gina despite the technical difficulties that we were having throughout that interview. I hope you guys get a lot of really good tidbits and also maybe a few pieces of advice as you guys venture into starting your own businesses and maybe even having multiple of them. Now, if you guys liked this episode, make sure to hit the thumbs up button right there, whether you're watching on YouTube or whichever platform that you are on. Make sure to leave a comment or a question that Gina might go into and answering that question later on if we end up just doing an in-person interview. And of course, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And remember that small steps matters. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.